Hello, and welcome to the online training series offered by the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota. This online module is entitled Mitigating School Suspension, Enhancing the Strengths of Kinship Caregivers. The authors of this module are Dr. Priscilla Gibson, Patrice Overton, and Betsy Matherws. Upon completion of this module, participants will be able to do the following. Clearly articulate the role of school suspensions among African American students and provide key consequences of such suspensions. Discuss the current literature on kinship caregivers' experiences with the school system. And identify 4 intervention strategies that can be incorporated in direct practice with kinship caregivers for purposes of assisting caregivers to minimize school suspensions and encourage school success for their children in their care. Several reflection questions have been incorporated in this training. Our goal is to ensure that learning is maximized by the questions asked and that participants are empowered to relate the content presented to their general practice with kinship caregivers and the children in their care. The first question is, what concerns have kinship caregivers brought to your attention about their child's school success? Please take a minute to think about this question. Kinship caregivers are faced with several concerns when dealing with the school system. The first is that the educational needs of children in kinship care are constantly changing over time. Caregivers have had minimal interaction with the school system because of the lengthy lapse in years between caregiving for their now adult children and caregiving for the children currently in kinship care. And there are constant changes in the living environment of children in kinship care, and these changes greatly impact their school retention and success. Grandparent caregivers are confronted with additional problems when negotiating services within the school system for the children under their care. There's also a lack of knowledge within the school system and other social systems about the specific needs of confronting families in kinship care. And finally, a paucity of research exists regarding kinship caregivers' experiences with the school system and the impact of school suspensions on caregivers and their kin. Let us now reflect on another question. What is the salience of suspensions for African American students? Please take a minute to think about this question. School suspension for African American students impacts the following. Number 1, a hindrance to school success and future life achievements. And number 2, the likelihood of being suspended from school is twice as likely for African American students in comparison to other racial groups in the United States. This likelihood is further compounded by the constant effects of poverty, a factor that is directly related to lack of parental monitoring and subsequent academic failure. Additionally, poor academic outcomes can be directly related to the high birth rates and to poverty-stricken environmental surroundings. Let us reflect on the third question. What are the hidden barriers in achieving school success for African American children in kinship care? Please take a minute to think about this question. Generally, there are 4 major risk factors that precipitate and contribute to ongoing school suspensions for African American students in kinship care. The first on this slide is environmental factors. These factors include the existing poverty experienced in the homes and the surrounding communities, factors that are often compounded by the student's perception of and/or their attitude towards school suspension. The second is school-related factors. These factors can include the relationships that students have with the teaching team and the student's sense of belonging or pride in their schooling environment and educational norms. The third factor are caregiver factors. These are factors that encompass the knowledge that caregivers have about existing school policies and procedures, and the kind of relationship caregivers build with the school personnel and the school system that their kin attend. Caregivers may also have concerns with maintaining a sense of belonging in relation to the school system, especially if they sense that the school system is not helpful or supportive of the students under the caregiver's care. Lastly, there are the individual child factors. These factors incorporate experiences of trauma by children in kinship care. cases of bullying or teasing by others in the school or community, racial discrimination, and ongoing concerns about the whereabouts or lack of care by birth parents. Based on our preliminary discussions, it is clear that school suspensions are more than just periods when students spend time out of the school system. Rather, the consequences of school suspensions are tragic and predispose students to academic failure, ongoing psychological concern, and the ultimate alienation or disconnection from the school system and their future sources of livelihoods. Additionally, suspended students are more likely to stop attending school on a long-term basis. They're also more likely to get involved with the juvenile justice system at an early age, and they're even more likely to commit prosecutable crimes. Up to this point in our discussion, we have looked at the problem of school suspension and its impact on students and their kinship caregivers. We have also highlighted barriers experienced by both the students and their caregivers in relation to the school system and the living environments. Finally, we have presented the various short-term and long-term consequences that accompany school suspensions. Based on our discussions, what then are the best intervention strategies that direct service personnel can utilize when engaging kinship caregivers whose children have experienced school suspensions? 4 intervention strategies have been developed from 3 key resources. The first is existing literature on African Americans' experience with school systems and student suspensions. The second is existing literature on kinship caregivers' experiences with the school system and the school-going children under their care, and the analysis of a pilot interview conducted with a caregiver who was providing care to 2 grandchildren, both of whom had experienced school suspensions. Both the literature and the pilot interview draw our attention to a key factor in direct practice approach. That is, the use of culturally appropriate services in ensuring direct service personnel are culturally competent when addressing concerns experienced by kinship caregivers and their children in the school and social systems. So what is cultural competency? Cultural competency involves the gaining of skills, knowledge, and values that are useful for culturally competent practice. This is a continuing learning process that should be taken into consideration when engaging African American caregivers. This slide highlights what a cultural competent practice approach for African American caregivers can include. The first is a respect for caregivers' knowledge and skills regardless of the caregiver's age, race, educational level, and socioeconomic status. Number 2, a continued use of formal titles such as Mr. and Mrs. unless one is given the permission to forfeit the use of titles in favor of first names. Number 3, allow caregivers the permission to tell their story from their lived experience. Number 4, listen to the narrated stories of discrimination and ongoing subjection to isms. Number 5, an avoidance of the natural inclination to take a moralistic stand against a caregiver's adult children, who may also be the birth parents of the children in kinship care. And lastly, a facilitation of a mutual learning process between caregivers and direct practice providers. Along with culturally competent practice, the practice approach incorporates 4 additional strategies that we will discuss in the remaining slides. These 4 strategies aim at providing direct practice personnel with useful information that can facilitate a positive interaction with kinship caregivers and their children. The outcome is the long-term minimization of school suspensions and an increase in school performance goals. Specifically, our training goals are to increase kinship caregivers' knowledge about the school system, especially student suspensions, and decrease the amount of school suspensions for African American students. The 4 strategies for practice approach focus emphasize the following key points. Number 1, kinship caregivers must be assisted to prepare themselves and their children to develop and maintain a positive relationship with the school system. Number 2, caregivers' concerns about social justice and discrimination in the schools must be addressed. Number 3, parental involvement should be encouraged. And number 4, caregivers and their children should be assisted with the development of a social support network. Let us first begin with the first practice strategy aimed at ensuring kinship caregivers have a positive relationship with the school system. We will initially focus on the caregivers before addressing the concerns of the children. When working with kinship caregivers, the first approach is to prepare caregivers and their children to embrace a positive relationship with the school system. Some of the best ways to fulfill this goal include assessing the caregiver's level of knowledge about the school policies, procedures, and behavioral expectations while helping them obtain any additional information they may be lacking. You can do this by printing out information for caregivers who may not readily have access to general information that is available in their communities or school system, and taking time to explain and elaborate on the information provided to caregivers so they have a proper understanding anytime services are provided. The second approach is to encourage caregivers to model out responsible behavior and attitudes to the children they are caring for in their households. Modeling out appropriate behavior is necessary because children tend to blame other children for their school suspensions, especially if adults in the home have not taught or modeled out to children how to take responsibility for one's own actions. And role modeling and encouragement by caregivers can be a factor in increasing student self-esteem. Let us now focus on the preparation of children. The next 3 slides provide information about the preparation of children. It is imperative that children be prepared to form a working relationship with their teachers. Fostering a positive student-teacher relationship includes encouraging children to stay in their role as students, thereby allowing teachers to be engaged in their learning and supervisory role within the school system, and also encouraging children to develop problem-solving skills by using their caregivers as a resource to address potential conflicts with teachers. This may involve emphasizing to children that adult-to-adult interactions may yield positive results during conflicts as opposed to child-to-adult interactions, a key factor in precipitating school suspensions. It is also important to discuss the importance of respect for school authority and encourage students to follow teachers' instructions. This factor is important because children in kinship care have experienced situations of helplessness and maltreatment and are prone to want to protect themselves from adults. Pointing out appropriate behaviors that should be encouraged and addressing inappropriate behavior that should be discontinued. Generally, children will display the same behavior across various environments, such that a child who is a bully at home is likely to be a bully at school. Assisting children with the concept of controlling anger, tempers, and related behaviors through teaching or modeling appropriate learned skills. This is important because children sometimes report that they have feelings of lacking or losing control over their behavior. Also, talking directly to children and addressing aggressive behavior that includes fighting. A key factor to note is that children's engagement in violent behavior is directly related to parental support or justification of solving problems through fighting. The second practice approach strategy focuses on addressing social justice concerns and discrimination in the school system. It is necessary to make caregivers comfortable about discussing perceived discrimination because feelings about unfair treatment are often associated with negative parental involvement with the school system. Additionally, the disproportionate suspensions experienced by African American students are a social justice issue because African American students tend to miss academic and lifelong economic opportunities because of school suspensions. Consequently, child welfare workers need to be prepared to listen to difficult conversation and work with ongoing aspects of discrimination. In working with caregivers, workers should expect to hear about unequal treatment, racism, and ongoing discrimination. Workers should allow caregivers to share their stories and acknowledge the accompanying feelings. Actions must be taken to help caregivers in identifying and utilizing problem-solving skills for all situations that arise with their children and the school system. And finally, workers should become advocates for both caregivers and their children. This may involve accompanying caregivers to their meetings with the school system. The third practice approach strategy focuses on encouraging parental involvement. Research has shown that parental involvement is a key factor in ensuring children's school success. Parental involvement is also associated with positive rule compliance and sociability by children at the school. Parents should also be encouraged to visit the schools in order to meet their children's teachers because increased parent-teacher interactions foster a supportive teaching and learning environment. In addition, the presence of parents in the classroom and setting provides a forum for African American parents to obtain information and skills training on how to promote learning at home. The formation of a quality working relationship between parents and their children's teachers and administrators greatly influences school success. Parents should endeavor to attend at least one school event or activity as part of supporting and engaging their children, thereby fostering their children's school success. The fourth practice approach strategy aims at providing social support networks for kinship caregivers and the children in their care. It is worth noting that kinship care is a stressful and time-consuming role. Caregivers may feel overwhelmed with their daily roles or activities and feel like they do not have enough time or energy to support their children's educational goals. Consequently, it is necessary to help caregivers determine how they can obtain social and related support from the school system, advocate for caregivers and their children with the school system, and encourage caregivers to seek additional support from family members. Children in kinship care experience constant changes in their living environments and accompanying relationship with parents and family. The result of such changes is an exacerbation of the ongoing stress for children in care. As such, social support must be provided to children as well in order to facilitate supportive relationships with family members and encourage ongoing support from their communities and places of worship. Referrals should be made to mentoring community-based organizations, such as the Big Brother Big Sister program, and advocates must make sure they discuss with both caregivers and their children the benefits of having positive social support systems. Please follow this link and read the article to further your understanding of academic challenges children face while in out-of-home care. In conclusion, let us review a brief summary of what was covered during this training module. The training module addressed the prevalence and overall concerns about school suspensions for African American students and their kinship caregivers. The training presented the key findings from current literature on kinship caregiving based on highlighted experience of caregivers whose children have experienced school suspensions. And 4 key intervention strategies were presented, and these focused on core approaches to assisting caregivers in their continued efforts to decrease school suspensions and foster school success for the children in their care. This concludes our learning module entitled Mitigating School Suspension, Enhancing the Strengths of Kinship Caregivers. A special thank you to the authors, Dr. Priscilla Gibson, Patrice Overton, and Betsy Matherws, and a special acknowledgement of the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota for their continued support.